the end of small business. There's a lot of factors coming together that are significantly impacting negatively small business, and I'm going to go into what some of those are. It's fascinating. It's something that's not really being discussed that much, so I think it'll be hopefully pretty illuminating. You decide for yourself. So one factor that people are talking about already is artificial intelligence, that, you know, a lot of retail, transportation, jobs. Now, the reason why this is impacting small businesses bigger than big businesses is because it's the big businesses that can make the investments in AI and that are automating everything, like, you know, Amazon with their warehouses and, you know, the big banks and, you know, for credit and for other services. So AI is one factor that's greatly impacting small businesses to the negative. Another one is the pandemic for a few different reasons. One is social distancing, that the big companies have the technologies to be able to work from home, you know, effectively. You know, the smaller companies, not always so much. And the big companies know how to utilize their workforces in more efficient ways, whether it be through, you know, software, whether it be through, you know, their ability to right-size their physical environments, whether it be through human resources, capabilities, and, you know, just a whole host of capabilities that small businesses don't have. So, you know, a lot of small businesses that really can't get out of their leases and are just stuck with spaces that are too big for them, and their customers are going to go down by 75% because you're only allowed to have a quarter as many customers as you had before in a physical space because of social distancing, for example. Those companies are in bad shape. Another factor is that these bailouts, you know, similar to what happened in 2008 when the banks got bailed out, like quantitative easing and a lot of these programs that have come out, they all favor wealth distribution. Like whenever, you've heard that famous saying, never let a crisis go to waste. Whenever there's a financial crisis, it's always the big guys that come out of it better. I mean, part of it is because of these government programs. Now, there is money set aside for small business, but it's not nearly enough. Like, you see how quickly it runs out. And it's the bigger industries that are really, you know, too big to fail, and that, you know, come out of this in the long run. Now, small business has been traditionally the lifeblood of America. I believe it's like 75 or even 90%, somewhere in that range, I don't know exactly, of all jobs are created by new business. But Peter Thiel famously said, you know, competition is bad, that all things are monopolies. There's a lot of things that big companies do to monopolize things. One is that they buy up their competitors. Another is that they do branding of to make it seem like there's competition when there's not. So, for example, you know, Pepsi and Coke, for example, they have a lot of different competing brands within their umbrella. So it looks like you're buying products that are not Coke and Pepsi, but you really are buying Coke and Pepsi because all the brands, you know, relate to Coke and Pepsi. So another factor is the law of accelerating returns. Like, it's so much bigger it's so much easier to get bigger than whatever was before. First, you have the capital markets, which have always been there, but increasingly, like Amazon and other companies, like if you have a story to tell that investors buy into, you know, you could do losses for a long time. And because of the law of accelerating returns, that companies are getting much bigger, much faster. Like Uber, for example, reached a valuation of $50 billion, you know, in about 6 or 7 years, which is unprecedented. And the law of accelerating returns says not only the change is increasing, but the rate of change is increasing exponentially. So, you know, soon you'll have a company getting to 50 billion in 6 months, or, you know, faster. And the companies that are now worth $1 trillion, like Apple got to 1.3 or 4 trillion dollars in about, when did they start? Like 1970 something, I believe. So like a little bit less than 50 years. In the future, you'll be having companies get to $1 trillion, you know, in a year or 2 years or less than a year, depending upon how far out you put it. So those companies that scale that big, that fast, it's going to be impossible to compete against them. I mean, look at things already, like Google has no real competitors, they're a monopoly. Facebook has no real competitors, they're a monopoly. Amazon has 50% market share in the United States. Shopify and eBay are a little bit competitors, Alibaba internationally. Tencent. So there are competitors, but most of these things are monopolies already. I mean, people think that like the monopoly stopped with the breakup of AT&T and Standard Oil before that, but we're living in a world like income inequality of the 1% and 99%. In terms of like the language that some people use, it's even more tilted in business. The small companies, then you have like financial stock exchanges, like you have to be a certain size to be listed on NASDAQ, or so there's just so many built-in advantages that favor the big companies. And with the pandemic and some of the other things that are accelerating that, in the future we're going to have greater and greater consolidation. Another thing is that we're moving back to a little bit more laissez-faire, or trickle-down, economics. I mean, it's not probably quite as much as it was maybe in its heyday, but governments are starting to take a more laid-back approach, and part of this is due to like the effects of lobbying. Like, for example, multinationals are bigger and more powerful than governments. And they, there's all the tax avoidance, so you can't compete against a company that isn't paying any taxes, legally. How are you going to do that when you have to pay taxes and they don't? The corporations are writing the laws. It's like, they have all the lobbyists and they, have all the PR firms. So, the laws are to the advantage of the big companies. So when you put together all the different things that I mentioned in this podcast, like even 6 minutes and 44 seconds, you can see that the advantages to the big companies are just massive and increasing rapidly.